but from a secular perspective, in the time we get to spend as family, the time that we come together to enjoy company. And one of the more pleasant times is that moment where we see the delight on children's faces, one of those key areas of what it means to be really enjoying life at this current period of time. We are currently looking at the doctrine of Christ, a very important doctrine in Christianity. Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, and Protestants all put a lot of stock within understanding the doctrine of Christ, what it means, what Christ means in and of his person, in and of himself. We looked first at conception, the theological importance of conception, that the link between Jesus' deity, God, and also Jesus' humanity. And then yesterday we looked at his incarnation, the made flesh, word made flesh. That's really what incarnation means, made flesh. Why was that important? What's its purpose, etc., etc. Today I want to look at Jesus' humanity, and I want us to really focus on that Jesus was born, he was birthed, he was born of a woman, he grew up. Luke chapter 2 tells us his birth, but at the same time talks about his growing up as well, an important process of humanity, that Jesus ate and Jesus drank, he slept, he was tired, he was weary, he was sad, he was happy, he showed joy, he showed tenderness, intimacy, all of the things that we know about ourselves and the people around us, etc., were part and parcel of Jesus' person, his actual physical person, that physical person that ascended, that sits at the right hand, this, the physicalness of what he was. And Jesus said, "See my hands, see my feet." When he appeared to the disciples after his crucifixion, his bodily form, his human form, was a key principle of us understanding his humanity. However, he lacked one important human element, and that he was without sin. Now, that may seem that you look at that and say, well, of course. Well, no, it's not that it's of course. Peter called him the unblemished lamb. Paul repeatedly through his letters made important references that Jesus couldn't be with sin in order to carry the burden of sin. And all in Hebrews, the author of Hebrews, does the same thing, linking the priest, which we'll talk about on Christmas Day. And you have Acts, and you have the issues with James and Jude. The whole of the New Testament really brings this concept of this perfect sacrifice, this sinless human. So I want us to look at a piece of scripture this morning from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, his second letter. And in chat we will turn to, if you'd like to turn with me to the 2 Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 20 and 21. And I'll read it to you now. "Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." Now, he made him sin. It's interesting, if you take a piece of that, Paul says that for our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him. And there's good references in the structure of the sentence. He made him to be sin. Jesus was made to be sin. In order to carry the sin, he had to then be made into that wrath, that rebellion, that ultimately he could make the choice. He had to be that person that would carry that rebellion in and of himself, so that actually God's wrath could be ultimately curtailed. Now, there's long words to describe that. It's not something we get into here. But I want us to really focus on that for the rest of the day. And then as we get ready for the Christmas season, the birth of our son, as we look at the sinless nature of his humanity is important. It's important because without us recognizing that there was perfection in his humanity, we lose why the cross becomes important. The birth, the incarnate birth, the miracle conception, the incarnation made flesh, the birth, and then the humanity of who he is, builds up to an important process that ultimately he was there to stand before God as our representative, just as Adam was our original representative, and he fell before God. And that's a key piece as we continue to look through the rest of the week. Tomorrow, we're going to start the process of the offices as we look at the prophet, that Jesus fulfilled the final prophet. And then he looked at the most holiest of priests on Christmas Day. And then the day after Christmas, we'll look at his kingship through the seat of David. And then finally, on Sunday, we'll bring it all together with why God had to become man, or in the Latin, cur deus homo. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look